Hey, it's Pastor Mike. Before we get started with today's episode, I want to encourage you to check out our other Time of Grace podcasts, like this one, The Non-Microwaved Truth by C.L. Whiteside. CL just has an amazing way to bring fresh perspective to some of my favorite passages from the Bible. You can search for The Non-Microwaved Truth wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And now on to today's episode.
When I was a kid, there was one thing that made me dislike unfairly the state of Iowa. Now, no offense to any of our friends from the state of Iowa, I'll explain. It wasn't because it was flat and I grew up around mountains. I think there's something beautiful about some flat corn land and prairie land. It wasn't that. Remember, this was when I was a kid. We only drove through a corner of it once, I think, on a family vacation. But you know what it was? It was the Iowa Basic Skills Test. You might also think of other Scantron tests like the ACT or the SATs. These big long tests where you're column after column, row after row, you have to fill in that little oval and do it all the way, question after question. I kind of liked those days when we had to take those long tests because we had longer recess, but aside from that, those tests seemed like they wouldn't end, and sometimes they were quite hard. Well, when you think of tests, especially uncomfortable ones in life, that's one of the ways that the Bible describes temptation. Temptation is not just this slippery slope. It actually is a time, a testing, so that we can persevere and demonstrate strength outside of us in those moments of trial. You think of some of the tests that you've endured in life, and not just a Scantron test, but real, legitimate tests. Like maybe your marriage was tested. It tested your patience, tested your ability to remain calm. It tested your faithfulness. But you were able to hopefully find strength in those moments of trial. And through that testing, you became stronger because of it. You think even as a kid, how many times do we say as adults, or even as kids, we wish we knew however many years ago what we know now? It doesn't matter how old you are. We wish that we knew back then the things that we know now, because now having that wisdom, we wish we could go back and do things differently when we maybe failed in life's tests. But now that we can see it with hindsight, doesn't that give us a type of strength? We call it wisdom and experience. See, tests and temptations are not these things that God puts out as traps, just waiting to see if we're going to land on the next landmine and blow up, and he's entertained by it. No, that's not what this is at all. I understand the question that commonly arises when it comes to temptations. God is in control, so therefore, why does he allow us to even be tempted? It's important for us to remember that he did not break this world. Humankind broke this world. But God still, in his wisdom, allows us to experience tests, not because he is vindictive, not because he doesn't care, but actually to allow us to trust in him and to find strength that we otherwise wouldn't have. In addition, he also allows us to experience tests and temptations in life so that we would long for eternity where those things don't exist anymore. This is a very challenging thing, especially when you and I think of those most difficult tests in life. I was talking to a lady who just recently was diagnosed with cancer. There's been actually several ladies that I know who've been diagnosed with cancer over the years. Maybe you know of some ladies or men too who are struggling with that. But when diagnosed with cancer, one of the things now having come out of it, she says, I still wouldn't trade that struggle for anything because I know more about myself and my God than I ever could have before. Of course, you wouldn't wish that upon anyone, that challenge, that battle with cancer. But the reality that she now has, the perseverance, that strength, God was working through that trial, through that struggle, to give her that strength. Does he not promise to do the same for us when we are tempted in any way? In the New Testament book of James, he puts it this way: Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. Now there's a lot there, but I purposely read all of it because it's so wonderful. God is not tempting. Instead, through trial, he allows us to experience those moments of temptation so that we trust in him, so that we find strength from him to overcome those tests. And it makes us stronger because of it. And every good and perfect gift comes from God, including the gift of the crown of life, where there is no testing or struggle. Yes, that means that in the here and now, we will face temptations. And maybe this is something that you may not have heard or may not have heard often. Temptations don't go away. For your entire life, you will face trials. It is never going to be easy. There's never a time when you stand on the victor's panel with your hands in the air holding the trophy because you conquered every one of the weaknesses of this world and yourself. But the reason that is true is so that we would never look to ourselves to find blessing and strength. Instead, we would look to God, who never changes like shifting shadows. Instead, he promises to bless us, to help us in our time of need, to strengthen us through whatever trials we face, and even when we fall flat on our face, who is the one who is there to pick us up? Still bearing the wounds of the cross. Full of forgiveness and grace, he brings us close to himself until he welcomes us for all eternity. So when you are being tempted, when you are being tested, when you face trials that are great and even small, it is God who gives you the blessings through his word. It is God who has already prepared a place for you with him in glory.